Real quick, I've got the Kronos controlling external synths, 2 of them. So one is the bass synthesizer, up to this key, the middle E right here, and then starting from F. So this is divided into 2 for 2 instruments, which are both on different MIDI channels. Though I suppose they don't have to be, but this one is MIDI channel 2. This one is MIDI channel 3. And this is important, because otherwise it won't work. The Korg Kronos is on global channel MIDI 1. So, the reason why splits and layers, the external synths don't pay attention to the settings you have on the Kronos, is because if you are trying to control external synths which match the channel that your Kronos is set to, then it'll override the splits and zones and layers that you program inside, for instance, combi mode. So in global, in basic, the tab in MIDI, that the first thing that opens up is the MIDI channel, and you can select 1 through 16. So for instance, if you just keep that as 1 and back into combi mode, there's these little arrows up here, and you can change this right here, but it's this tab, the 3rd tab at the bottom, timbre parameter. And the first one says MIDI. So you change these. They're usually by default into internal, but I just changed them to EX2, the last option of this little drop-down menu. And that will disable the internal sound for this timbre track and make it so that it can control external synths, or rather pay attention to the zones and filters for the MIDI in this tab here, that it will adhere to those rules that you set. But anyway, the global channel is MIDI 1. You see the G after the 1. If you had these set to 1, then this next tab, what we can do in keyboard zones, won't have any effect. So for the Mellotron, I have the lowest key here at the split point. So then on this timbre, the top channel, it's by default it's way up to the top. You bring that down so that it's split perfectly. If you have a Kronos, you know how to do this. But the important thing is that by default, the Mellotron lowest key is here, and it spans 3 octaves up to the next F and ends here. So how do you make it so that the F is right here? You've moving the range of the Mellotron that it responds to up the keyboard so that you save the bottom half of the keyboard for the bass synthesizer. That is done on the pitch tab. So pitch here. So the Mellotron, I think it is, you set to -24, and the bass synthesizer, which only responds to the lower half of the MIDI range anyway, set to -12. So like, I'm pressing the same key and increasing that value. How do I access those lower notes? And this bass synthesizer doesn't respond above, I think, C4 or C5. And the Mellotron doesn't respond to anything lower than F3, I think it is. So these 4 keys do nothing. So if we want to keep the bass synthesizer to play these, you're going to have to mess with the pitches within the pitch tab, which is under, remember we set the MIDI channels correctly, and then we have to set the pitches correctly. And yeah, whatever you control might have its own controls. to change the sounds and whatnot. So maybe you don't want to send any of the MIDI information, because you get stuck notes this way. So all of these will probably be enabled, but you might have to disable all of these options in the MIDI filter so that you don't send accidentally too much information out of the Kronos and into these other synths. That could create stuck notes. Like for instance, if we change to setlist and change back to combi, it's sending MIDI information out when you're changing these modes, and the Mellotron doesn't like that. So disabling everything really but note on and note off and the note ranges, anything beyond that, CC, SysX, the LSB, MSB, I don't have that set up at all. If I want to change the preset on the bass synthesizer, that's where this one comes in. And by this one I mean the Fader Fox EC4. I'm going to control the filter. And many other parameters. And then if I want to change the sound of the Mellotron, I could just reach down here and give it a go. So yeah, that's basically it.